Imagine standing at the edge of a 200-foot cliff in absolute darkness, wrapping a rope made from twisted plants around your waist, knowing that if it snaps, you'll fall onto volcanic rock that will shatter every bone in your body. Winter 73 B.C. 70 escaped gladiators stood on Mount Vesuvius summit, trapped between a sheer cliff that everyone said was impossible to descend, and 3,000 Roman soldiers slowly starving them to death. They had two choices that both ended in death: surrender and face crucifixion, or charge down the single path into 3,000 swords. So Spartacus made a decision that sounded like mass suicide but would become military legend. He ordered his men to climb down the cliff everyone said was impossible, using ropes woven from wild vines that might snap at any second, descending in absolute darkness while Roman sentries patrolled below. If you read the Roman reports from that day, this shouldn't have been a battle. It should have been 70 bodies smashed on volcanic rock. There was no path down that side of the volcano. No stairs. No previous climbers. Nothing but 200 feet of vertical death. The Roman commander Gaius Claudius Glaber didn't even bother posting guards on the cliffside because he knew physics doesn't negotiate with desperate slaves. But history is written by the survivors who do the impossible. When 70 gladiators descended that cliff in 4 hours of hell, they didn't hit bottom and die. They vanished into darkness. By dawn, 2,800 Romans would be corpses and kitchen slaves would be soldiers. This is how one night on a volcano changed Rome forever through vine ropes, silent throat cutting, and the transformation of desperate men into an army that would eventually, number 120,000, 73 B.C. The Roman Republic stretched across the Mediterranean with power built on foundations of human misery measured in chains and blood. 1 in every 3 people walking Roman streets wore invisible chains of slavery, worked the fields until they collapsed, built monuments to Roman glory, and died for entertainment in arenas while crowds cheered. Rome's entire economy ran on stolen lives and broken backs. In Capua, 200 miles south of Rome, stood the gladiator school of Lentulus Batiatus, not a school, but a factory of death, where men were trained to kill beautifully for crowd amusement. Here, 3 names would soon terrify every Roman citizen and make mothers lock their doors at night. Spartacus, the Thracian enigma, once a soldier. Some say fighting for Rome itself before fate threw him into chains. In the arena, he moved like death given human form. Each motion calculated for maximum efficiency. Each strike designed to kill rather than entertain. But behind those cold eyes worked a strategic mind that saw beyond sand and blood. Crixus, the Gallic berserker, where Spartacus fought with surgeon's precision. Crixus fought with earthquake fury, built like a siege engine. He could break shields with bare hands and crush skulls with fists. Crowds loved his savage style, never knowing that beneath the rage burned dreams of vengeance against every Roman who'd ever held a whip. Oenomas, the Celtic strategist, older than the others, scarred from 100 arena battles. He understood something his younger companions were still learning. Raw strength meant nothing without tactics. Fury accomplished nothing without planning. He'd survived longer than any gladiator had a right to survive, and he intended to die free rather than entertaining Romans. These men should have been enemies: Thracian, Gaul, and Celt forced to murder each other for Roman pleasure. But in the fetid barracks of Batiatus's school, where men slept in chains, they found common cause that transcended tribal hatreds. The spark came when Batiatus decided to sell them for a special event where they'd fight to the death for a wealthy patron's birthday celebration. Better to die attempting freedom than perform one final time for Roman pleasure and profit. The breakout itself became legend whispered in slave quarters across Italy. 200 gladiators, armed with nothing but kitchen knives and meat cleavers, stolen from the school's kitchens. Guards caught completely off guard by slaves they'd tormented for years. In minutes that felt like hours of concentrated violence, the impossible happened. Gladiators flooded into Capua's streets, killing anyone who tried to stop them. Only 70 escaped the city through a combination of luck, speed, and willingness to kill without hesitation. But those 70 would shake Rome's foundations until the empire itself trembled. Here's where Roman arrogance sealed their fate with bureaucratic stupidity. The Senate didn't send legions of professional soldiers or recall veterans from frontier campaigns. Why waste real military force on escaped kitchen slaves? They appointed Gaius Claudius Glaber, a praetor more comfortable with politics than warfare, more concerned with Senate votes than tactics, and gave him 3,000 militia citizen soldiers eager for easy glory against poorly armed slaves they expected to surrender immediately. What happened next defied all military logic and every tactical assumption. Within days of the breakout, the 70 gladiators had grown to 700 as slaves abandoned their masters to join the rebellion. Word spread like wildfire through slave communities. Gladiators had beaten Roman guards with kitchen knives. The impossible had happened once. It could happen again if you were brave enough to run. But Spartacus had a plan forming that would shatter Roman confidence forever and prove that desperate innovation beats military doctrine. Glaber marched from Rome with 3,000 militia, their bronze helmets gleaming in autumn sun, confident in their numerical superiority. These weren't Rome's elite legionaries who'd conquered Carthage and crushed Greek phalanxes. These were shopkeepers and farmers playing soldier. Drawn by promises of easy victory and slave auction gold, they'd split. They sang as they marched, already mentally dividing imaginary spoils from selling captured gladiators. The equipment disparity should have been decisive and guaranteed Roman victory. The gladiators had seized kitchen implements during their escape: meat cleavers, roasting spits, a few rusty swords from the school's practice weapons. They'd ambushed one wagon of gladiatorial equipment, gaining perhaps 24 real weapons among 700 men facing 3,000 armed soldiers. By every calculation, it was laughable. Slaves with kitchen tools against an army. But Spartacus didn't choose to make his stand on open ground, where Roman numbers and equipment would overwhelm them through sheer mass. He chose Mount Vesuvius, not yet the volcano that would bury Pompeii and Herculaneum, but a mountain covered in wild vines and dense forest. The mountain rose like a great fist from the Campanian plain. Its lower slopes crawled with thick vegetation, but the upper reaches were sheer cliff faces of volcanic rock that looked impossible to climb. Most importantly, for Spartacus's plan, there was only one path to the summit, a narrow track barely wide enough for 3 men walking abreast. It was a natural fortress with what seemed like a fatal flaw: no escape route if the enemy controlled the single path. Glaber arrived and immediately saw what every military manual would tell him. The slaves had trapped themselves like animals in a cage. He positioned his forces at the single path's base, establishing a textbook siege that should guarantee victory through starvation? Why risk Roman lives attacking uphill when hunger would do the work with mathematical certainty?
You cheated, you dog! Pay him!